This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Ganya.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Well, I believe Jennifer and I have demonstrated our love for all things science across all of the realms.
Yes.
And today's episode definitely falls into one of those other realms.
It absolutely does. So what problem are we solving today?
What is the immune system's secret weapon to fight disease?
Ooh, what is the immune system's secret weapon to fight disease? This is going to be a very cool conversation, I think. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
I agree. This is definitely going to be fun. Our guest today is the wonderful Dr. Namita Gandhi. She is an immunologist.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Namita.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, this is going to be so much fun because we don't get to talk about immunology a whole lot. So I'm going to kind of two-part this question. First of all, as a kid, did you always know you wanted to be an immunologist? And also, can you tell us, for those of us who may not know, what is that? What is an immunologist?
That's a good question. So I was one of those kids that always asked why.
Yay! You and I could have been best friends.
You're good company.
Yes.
Exactly. And my dad would always say, because, or
Yep.
I'd get answers that didn't really make sense to me. So I would dig into it on my own. And what I
Okay.
also was, one of the things I was so curious about and that I wanted to dig into is medicine and science of medicine.
Okay.
And so as I decided to go into that area, that space in my education, the science of medicine is so connected with the immune system. And so many diseases are involved with the immune system. So that's what I decided to study is immunology, which is the study of our immune system.
Oh, which is kind of important, right? To us humans.
Exactly. It is. It is not only for us humans, but so many other species also have immune systems.
Yes.
And they defend us from external pathogens, and they're our internal defense system. So that's why they're important.
So digging just a smidge deeper right there, was someone in your family sick all the time? Maybe you were a sick kid, or was there something as you started learning in immunology that sort of caught your, whoa, that's super cool. I've got to learn more about that.
Yes. Just the more I dug into it, the more information unraveled. And then I felt like there's more I need to know. It just was like an onion, peeling it and covering more and newer things.
Okay.
And that's what really entrapped me into immunology. And honestly, still to this day, after 20 years of studying immunology, we're still unraveling the onion.
Yes, that's true. Well, so immunology is kind of like being a detective, right? Like the Solve It for Kids. You have problems you have to figure out how to solve, and sometimes you solve them and sometimes you don't, or sometimes it leads you to things you didn't know. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I would say it's not only immunology, but I would just say scientists.
Yes, that's
and
very
people
true.
who are in science. You don't even have to be a full-fledged scientist, but you're always tackling a problem and coming up with a solution and then testing that solution and see if it works. And if it doesn't, you go back or you refine your hypothesis because of what you learned in that trial and error.
Absolutely.
So is immunology similar to other areas of medicine where you can specialize?
Yes, actually, it's true. So I'm a PhD, so I study the cells involved with the immune system. But now, if you're a physician, so if let's say you have a problem with your immune system, the thing is, it can be part of a lot of different diseases.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I believe the immune system is really our heroes. I mean, they really protect us and help defend us
I
from
like
so
that.
many diseases like viruses and bacteria and anything that's foreign, it can reject it. The other thing it does is you're always constantly looking in your body for things that look wrong, or let's say something that may become a tumor, it can catch it before it does.
Right.
So
okay.
So that is really always protecting us. But there are cases where it's a little bit confused or it gets overactive sometimes, and then it can lead to or be a part of a disease. So you can go see a physician that specializes in that type of, immune disorder. And one would be like allergy. So you would go to an immunologist or an allergist for that. Yeah. Then another area is if you have something wrong with your joints and there's lots of activity, overactivation of the immune system with your joints, then you would go to a rheumatologist. So you see, in the medical field, there's different specialists that cover some of those disease areas where the immune system is a little bit off whack.
Okay, so you are not a practicing physician, so you don't work directly with patients. What does your day look like?
So I work for companies, biotech companies or pharmaceutical companies. And what we do in our daily work is make new medicines.
Okay.
All right.
And with making new medicines, I work in a space called translational medicine or translational science, where we're really thinking about taking those basic biology insights and then pairing it with the lab data that some of my scientists are creating or other scientists around the world are creating that we learn from, and then connecting it with the patients and the diseases and preparing the drug to be tested in humans.
Okay. So what lab data are you using? Do they do experiments on the cells?
Yes, they do experiments on the cells. So one part of our work, and as I mentioned, I work with all different kinds of scientists.
Oh, okay.
So some are in the lab. I'm an immunologist. I work with a toxicologist. I work with pharmacologists. I work with all these different types of scientists. I also work with doctors that actually see patients. And then I also work with business people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we all come together.
You're like the glue, right? That kind of pulls it all together. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So the translational people kind of pull it all together.
Okay.
And so the lab scientists are working in the laboratory, or we sometimes use laboratories that specialize in something. And we hire them to create experiments. We come up with the experiments in our head, and then we ask them to run the experiments for us.
Cool.
And then we get the data. Yeah. So what I get to do is I get to do the fun part. What I think is the fun part is looking at all these different pieces of data. And then connecting the dots in my head about what the data means.
Oh, okay. There's so many steps. I mean, I don't know that a lot of people, including me, realize that there's someone that kind of pulls it all together. That makes sense, though, I guess, right?
I mean, making medicines is one of the hardest things, and it takes a very long time. And we have a lot of failures, like we talked about in science. You do an experiment and sometimes it doesn't work. So we have a lot of key hypotheses that sometimes, it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and that could be expensive too, right?
Exactly. But when you get it right, and then you are able to see, as I have worked on medicines that actually have gotten approval by the FDA, and now patients are using them, and then you talk to the patients. And you see how transformed their lives are because now they have a medicine for something that was where they were suffering so much. That is really rewarding.
Oh, I'm sure.
I imagine. Now, I don't know if you can answer or not. Can you give us one example of one of those medicines that was approved? It might help us sort of connect some dots on the process that you work through.
Yeah, I can give you a lot of examples. I'll tell you the one that I worked on that I'm very proud of. We see commercials on TV all the time about it. It's called Dupixent.
Oh, yeah. I see that commercial. Yeah, we see it all the time. Yeah.
So I worked on that one from the very beginning when it was just like an idea. And then we were able to, over 10 years, work away, trench away, working with all these different people, trying experiments. We also saw other people in other companies failing at these same experiments. So it was kind of a treacherous road. When you see other people working on the same concepts, but it's not working for them, you get nervous, like, is this going to work? But then it does. And you see the data coming from a clinical trial, and you see how much patients' lives improved.
Wow.
And it's just, as I mentioned, really rewarding.
Yeah. That's probably the best part of medicine, is when you can help people with all of these different things. So I'm curious, because you started as a kid, kind of problem solving whenever. Are you liking your job? Because it sounds like there's lots of problems that you have to solve on many different levels. Did you imagine yourself as a kid, like, doing all these different things?
Well, I used to be one of those kids that, like, I didn't like bath time. So I would go into the bathroom, and we had a big bathroom, and I would make potions when I was supposed to be taking a bath. I mixed together my mom's Charlie perfume with
there you go.
And I don't know.
So from potions as a kid to medicines that are helping people
That's
now.
awesome.
I'm starting to see some dots connecting together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so we've talked all about, immunology. Let's bring it back to the question of, what is the immune system's secret weapon to fight disease?
Yes. So the secret weapon is the antibodies.
Oh.
So one of their cells, we have many different types of white blood cells in our body, which is part of the immune system. And one of the cells, which is called the B cell, it actually makes, and I call it a she sometimes.
Yeah.
She makes antibodies, and they are Y-shaped molecules. So they're in a Y shape, and you have two arms and then a body. And the two arms are sticky. They stick to things like viruses or bacteria. And they can serve as like a red flag. So sometimes the white blood cells are looking in the body, and they don't necessarily see all the viruses as clear as day. But when the antibodies are there, it is like they're blinking and glowing. And there's a, arrow here, come here kind of thing. And the antibodies are super important to activate and help the immune system remove these bacteria or viruses or whatever that antibodies stick to.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do the antibodies know what to stick to?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Now, the antibodies, or the B cells that make the antibodies, they need some time. They need about 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
To sort that out. And like, I'll give you an example. Again, when I was young, I had the chicken pox.
Okay.
And the chicken pox lasted exactly about 21 days.
Wow.
Where I had itchy rash on my skin.
Yep.
And for some reason, then at 21 days, boop, they're gone. And what we know now is what happens in your immune system is the little chickenpox virus is floating around, and your B cells are learning about it and trying to make antibodies. And they make prototypes, and they try until finally, around 21 days, they come up with the right one.
They figured out.
Oh my gosh. The B cells are like tiny little you inside the body.
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good point. Now, one other thing I want to add to this, and then we can get into the medicines, is now that B cell will remember that chickenpox virus forever.
Yes.
And if you ever see it again, like if your younger sibling has it, you will get the itchy things again because your B cells will make antibodies right away.
Yes.
So it remembers.
So a little aside here, and it remembers sometimes you don't even have to have the disease that, it doesn't have to be that bad, because my mom said that I got chickenpox. My brother was like, 18 months, 15 months, whatever, older than me. And I was like a year old or 9 months old when I got chickenpox from him. And I only had like 3 pox. But 10 years later, when my two younger brothers got it, and my poor one brother, I mean, he was just covered.
Mm.
My mom was worried, they were like, oh gosh, she only had 3, and I never got it. So my B cells must have been really good.
Exactly.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you were going to say, is there a way that medicines work with B cells or something like that?
Well, so what we figured out is because naturally antibodies are such a potent weapon inside your body, the scientists have figured out, why don't we make them in the laboratory?
Oh.
And we can make them for things that we know cause diseases. And then we give them to the patient, and then we should see the disease get better.
Is it faster too?
It can be. It depends on the disease.
Okay.
But we take, obviously, I told you making a drug is a very long process. But when you give it to the patient, it's right away. They're not waiting 21 days.
So it speeds up that process too. That's cool.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example, because there's over 100 drugs, medicines that are approved by the FDA that are antibodies.
Okay.
So we're already using them. And some of them are for cancer.
Okay.
Some of them are for, as we talked about, Dupixent is an antibody for allergy or allergic diseases.
Right.
We have some that are for cholesterol. We have some that are for other diseases. Yeah. So they're rheumatoid arthritis. We have some antibodies. Yeah. So there's lots of the antibodies, and we can make, the sticky part that antibodies stick to viruses. Well, we can make the sticky part to anything we want.
Oh.
That's floating in the body. Yeah.
Okay.
Tricky part is knowing what to make the antibody stick to. So
that controls what disease you're trying to attack?
That's right.
Ooh, yay me!
I just had that same moment. I'm like, I think I'm starting to understand.
Can you explain that a little more?
Well, I think of diseases as the most complex puzzle that we ever know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the simplest puzzle, I would say you have something that is something like a protein or a substance in your body that's hyperactive, and you have you have a lot of it.
Okay.
And so you would use an antibody to that, whatever it's, going up too much, and you want to stop that. And you bring it down to a level that's normal.
Oh.
So and then the disease goes away.
Yes.
So that is your simplest example.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we know that it's not as simple most of the time.
It's not that simple to do, right? It's simple to say, not to do. Okay.
So sometimes there is not just one protein, it's multiple proteins, or there's things that are hidden, or there's things that we don't even know about yet.
Right.
So to really understand the puzzle of a disease, we start trying to hit it with a few things and see what happens. And by doing that, we are learning along the way. And some diseases we have learned a lot about, but others we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you led me right into my question. So is the idea of producing antibodies in the laboratory, is that sort of the future of human medicine on how we may get to actual cures for things to eliminate more of them?
I hope so. I feel that if we know exactly the root cause of a disease, then you can use maybe an antibody or some other kind of medicine to get to that and make it normal again. That would be the trick.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I've heard that sometimes when you create a drug that works well for, say, this disease, then you suddenly find out it works for this disease and this disease, and the scientists are surprised, right? Like, how does that happen? Do they make it for one and then they say, "Oh, hey, that looks maybe similar to what's happening in this one," and then try it out?
Exactly. Like this is where we're connecting those dots. And it's something that we do in translational research too, is we start to see a pattern of things that are happening in the body, in the physiology of one disease, that then you study another disease and you're like, wow, it has similar flavor or smell to it. It seems like
Right.
Could be these could be the same. So that's exactly how we then test it and you see if it works, and it does. And I'll give you the example that we just gave you about Dupixent is one of those examples.
Okay.
Where we thought it was going to work in a skin disease, and it does. And then it works in asthma. And then it works in a nasal sinusitis disease, a polyps in your nose.
Oh,
and you're like, what does the lung and the nose and your skin have in common? Well, there is a signature of the process, the biological process leading to these diseases that is very similar.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I feel like rewarding is not a strong enough word for when you find something like that also starts helping other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we want to help out with all these things. We didn't realize that the work we were doing over here on, Project A was also going to touch Project B and even C.
Exactly. Yeah.
That must give you so many other dots to start, thinking about when you start working on a new project.
Absolutely.
That sounds really cool. So we happen to have an author that is part of our podcast here. Jennifer writes a lot of books. And I believe you have something that you would like to share with our audience.
Yes. So I have also written a book. It's a children's book called The Immune Heroes.
Yay.
And as we just talked about, it showcases how your immune system are really the heroes in your body. And in this particular book, there's a little boy who gets a little scrape on his knee, and we see how the immune heroes get activated and jump into action to rescue him and save him or protect him from enemy bacteria.
Oh, I like that.
I love it.
And
totally sounds like a hero story.
So what ages would this be for?
This would be ages maybe around 4 to 8 years old.
Okay.
And spoiler alert, the special weapon is involved at the end. Oh. The antibodies are part of the story.
Very cool. So tell everybody where they can find this book, Dr. Namita.
Sure. You can find this book on Amazon and you can purchase it there. And you can also find out more information on my website, which is www.immuneheroes.com.
Oh, that's so cool. This is fun. And
I love immune heroes.
Right. But think about this. This is some pretty complex science that you are describing to 4 to 8 year olds, which means the rest of us should be able to understand too, right? But I mean, I think that's awesome. I love making science accessible to kids. It gets them interesting. Besides, maybe you might inspire a future immunologist, Dr. Namita. Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be really cool. Especially what I feel very humbled by is this particular generation where they've already seen some unique upbringing, and challenges with the pandemic and the effects of health on our lifestyle. And they've come out of it so resilient and so adaptable. And those are the core principles of being innovators and being scientists. So I think they're already geared up for it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Great. And how relatable in the book that they just get a scrape on their knee.
Yeah,
everybody's had one or dozens. So
exactly.
Relatable to take such a complex idea and just bring it right down to something every one of us has got. That's great.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay. So we have learned tons about immunology, and Jeff and I could have quizzed you way more about drug development. So we might have to have another conversation about that, just the three of us, because that was so intriguing. But we are now at the point in our show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. So what is your challenge for our listeners, Dr. Namita?
So we talked a little bit about patterns and how we see things that are alike and dislike. And we also notice that when you get inside, you may notice things that are similar and dissimilar.
Okay.
So my challenge is think about fruit.
Okay.
So if you have an orange and you have a lemon and you have an apple, now they're all round, but which one is most similar from the inside?
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, I like that. I mean, I thought you were going in a different direction, right? Similar from the inside.
Exactly.
You're gonna have to think about that, man.
That is how I was talking about. We were thinking about solving the puzzle of diseases because we're thinking about what's similar from the inside.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Which is even more difficult because it's easy to see from the outside. You can tell why they're different. Wow. I got a whole big insight into immunology right there with that one.
Yes. This is so relatable.
Good job.
It's so understandable. This was great.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This has been such an amazing conversation. I have learned so much. I think you have too as well, right, Jeff?
I almost want to go out and scrape my knee.
Well, don't do that.
Just so I can watch it fix.
Anyway, thank you so much for being on Solve It for Kids, Dr. Namita.
Thank you
for having me. It was a lot of fun.
What an interesting conversation. One of my favorite things about being part of this podcast is talking about topics and subjects that I'm not typically interested in, so I don't read about them too much or I don't dive into them. But as soon as we start talking to a really cool scientist about it, I totally get interested. This was fascinating.
Yeah, it was. And, it kind of brings me back to my days of biochemistry, which was a long time ago. And DNA and all this kind of stuff and talking about antibodies. And it was really intriguing how they're doing all of these amazing things. And I love how Dr. Namita made it easy for us to understand, right? Because it's kind of a complicated topic, but she just did these comparison things and it kind of makes you look at things differently now.
Oh, absolutely. I had no idea where she was going to go with her challenge. I was like, we are talking way above some of our levels and the kids don't have access. And she just pulls out, well, everybody, we have been talking about patterns during the show and how your expectations may not match what you think, especially with the differences between inside and outside.
Yeah.
So Dr. Namita's challenge for us, everyone, think about fruit and what is similar or dissimilar from the inside of those fruits. What a simple and easy science experiment that we can do to connect to Dr. Namita's work and this episode.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's kind of funny, I guess now, as adults, we kind of know what's inside the fruit. But when you think about it, when you're a kid, you don't expect when you cut open an orange for there to be sections, right? Like segments.
Right.
And some fruits or vegetables have seeds. Some have like big seeds, like a pit. So there's all these different things. So if any of you make a revelation when you open up one of your fruits or vegetables these days, please share it with us. We'd love to hear about it. We are at KidsSolve at Facebook, X, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we have every episode there. And there is a page with information about the guest and also books that you could read to learn more, because maybe you would like to do this as a career one day, which would be really amazing.
And Jen, I don't know about you, but until next time, I will be thinking about fruits and vegetables that I don't normally have in my kitchen and whether or not I already know what's inside of them before I go ahead and do this science experiment. Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on the podcast for kids and families, Solve It for Kids.